Today we're talking with Amanda Bennett from the Atlanta Botanical Garden about what I think is one of the most underrated categories of plants.
Me too.
Ornamental grasses.
Yeah, ornamental grasses. I've not always been a fan, like I told you earlier.
Well, let's kind of break down the whole world of ornamental grasses into maybe some useful categories.
Yep.
And then let's talk about some that you really like, Amanda.
Yeah, absolutely. So some big categories would be ones just for annual use, which we'll talk about today. Ones that have gotten hybridized more so than others, which also have great ornamental uses. And then you get more into the straight species, and they've been doing a lot of breeding with species because sometimes the species can get a little unruly. But there's some great ones out there for the native fans that they can incorporate into their gardens too.
And one thing ornamental grasses do is they add a texture that we don't really get from any other category of plants. And it took me a while as a gardener to really get into grasses. You know, we can be easily tempted by the perennials and the big flowers, bold foliage, but there's also a lot of really neat stuff going on with ornamental grasses.
There is, and you know, this isn't exactly gardening 101. This is kind of gardening 201. Once you kind of get into it and really like it and you want those textural changes, that's where ornamental grasses come into play, and that's where my love of them really stepped up and kind of, I understood it. After I really was gardening for a long time, I really got it, and now I'm a huge fan.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about some that you really like that work in your garden and that are featured here at Atlanta Botanical Garden.
Absolutely. So I would be 100% remiss, and I'm not being paid to say, that I can't go without mentioning the Carex Ever series. So this is Everillo. In my opinion, one of the best set of multi-purpose ornamental grasses that have come out in a long time. Man, they can go, Everillo we have planted in full shade, we had it planted in almost full sun, morning light, afternoon shade, they are fantastic. So easy to grow, moderate water, like I said, and most of them are kind of this low, but they add a really nice pop. I really like Everillo. Hard to get that chartreuse brightness and full shade.
Right.
Everillo is going to do that for you. Keeps its golden color, which is hard.
Especially in shade.
Yep.
And they work wonderfully as a ground cover is the way that I typically use them.
Yep.
Or for, you know, as edging or bordering something.
Absolutely, yeah. For anybody who likes that. And then in this planting, we've kind of dotted in some hostas just to get some textural change as well. It's all about plays on textures with grasses.
Carex is technically a sedge, right?
It is technically a sedge, yeah. And Carex, there is a Carex for you. So there's the Ever series, which are hybrids, obviously. There's tons of natives. There's tons of Carexes. So if you're really looking for, and many of them are a little bit smaller in stature. So if you're looking for a little bit smaller statured grass, look into the Carex realm.
Amanda, one of the many things that fascinates me about gardening is when we take an edible and move it into the world of ornamental.
Yes.
I think it's so exciting, and it allows people to experience the plant in maybe for the first time, but also in a different way, and this is a wonderful example of that.
This is a wonderful example, so that's something we love doing here at the Botanical Garden. This is millet, Jade Princess, so the longer it stays out here, the more yellow that foliage is going to get, and it's bred for the yellow foliage, but we love using grasses and grains in particular, those edibles, in unusual ways. You'll see we'll plant sugarcane out, which is going to get gargantuan, so don't plant it if you don't have room for that. But you know, there's a variegated one. There's really fun edible slants just to add into the ornamentals, just to prove to people that edibles can be beautiful too.
Right, no doubt. I remember last year you were growing an heirloom rye, and it's this beautiful, like glaucous, almost bluish foliage.
Yes.
And in the wind, it's like, you know, just
waves.
Elegant.
I know, yeah, and you know, there's no reason not to have fun. If you have edibles, particularly the grains and the grasses, which are some of my favorites, mix them into your perennial borders or your annual beds. This one is staunchly annual. A lot of the grains are, whether they be winter or summer grains. Many of them are annual in nature, but there's no reason why you can't enjoy them in a little bit different of a format.
The world of ornamental grasses is enormous, and there's almost every color you can imagine, all these different textures and forms. Working into ornamental grasses, you know, maybe we're familiar with some really basic ones, and as you start to peel back the layers of what's available in that section, it's
huge.
Unbelievable. And here we have this bright blue foliage, you know, an incredible pop. This is an amazing plant.
Yeah, love it. You are absolutely right. I mean, you could do a whole textural and size study just with ornamental grasses, and that's why they're fun to mix into perennial borders like this. This is Panicum Dallas Blues. Super excited when they really started working with panicums a number of years ago. You know, the natives are huge. They started bringing down that scale and introducing colors like blue. You can't get that color or that texture in anything else but these.
Right, absolutely. I actually love using this plant in containers as like a feature. The grasses do wonderfully in containers.
Yep.
In many cases, I think they're happier, especially if they have that to choose over, red clay.
Absolutely. Yeah, some of them you'll want to amend soil, and like
Right.
I said, across the country, there's a grass for you, no doubt. Don't shy away from using them as centerpieces in pots. Also, don't shy away from leaving it as the centerpiece in the pot through your winter season just to get a little different look.
Right, right. Many of them look wonderful well into, their deciduous period.
Absolutely.
It's almost like a dried flower arrangement. So yeah, don't cut them down too soon. This is another great cultivar right here behind us.
It is. This one's Carex divulsa. This is a species. So we talked about a whole wide range of cultivar and hybrid Carexes. Then there's the whole world of just species Carexes. And how can you not like this one? We had Spirobolus on this hill. I love Spirobolus. Doesn't like these almost 45-degree angles quite as much as a Carex would. And we put this Carex out. It hadn't missed a beat since we planted it.
One thing I love about Carex is how durable it is. And you think about what environment does Carex not thrive in. You can use it almost anywhere. It can be in more moist environments.
Yep.
It can handle drier environments.
Yep.
And there aren't many categories of plants that you can say that about.
They're a phenomenal group of grasses. If I'm going to say someone just getting into ornamental grasses, one that you might want to lean to, Carexes is a great one to start with because they are so durable, like you said, and there's one for every spot.
It's how you flex your green thumb.
Exactly.
Amanda, I think the darling of all the ornamental grasses is Muhlenbergia. There is no plant that gives you that range of color and texture. It's this feathery, soft, and when it's in bloom, almost like a little puff of either pink or white smoke in the garden.
Yeah, you're right. It is the darling of the garden, and for good reason. You're right. Nothing gives you that in the fall. It's almost ethereal when you're seeing when in big masses, which is the way I think that plant should be planted. So pink or white, like you mentioned. There's a couple of cultivars out. I think you just can't go wrong with the straight Muhlenbergia capillaris, which is the pink muley. Gorgeous. There's lots of other muleys out there though. So Muhlenbergia is probably one of my favorite genus that we've gotten into around here. Lenheimeri is a really beautiful, very stately, kind of traditional looking grass. And then one that's very misunderstood, at least in the southeast, but planted more out toward Texas and some of those other more arid ranges, is Muhlenbergia demosa, which is really one of my favorites, but it gets planted here, grows just fine here, but for all the people who cut their grasses back, it doesn't like it. It'll kill it by it, and then just leave it alone and let it grow.
Awesome. Well, man, I hope that we've inspired people to take a second good hard look at ornamental grasses. I'm always inspired when I meet with you, and I'm going to go to the garden center and go find some of these.
I hope a lot of people do.
Absolutely.